Hello, and welcome to my series where I analyze startups from a product perspective. Today, we're going to talk about Decent, an early stage startup that is currently enrolled in Y Combinator's winter batch. Decent allows musicians to raise funding for their projects directly from their fans in return for a share of future profits. You see, making an album, or even just a single, costs quite a lot of money. There's studio time, editing, paying collaborators, going on tours to promote the recording. It all costs money. Traditionally, musicians would get that money by signing a deal with a record label. The label would fund all the stuff we just talked about, but in return would ask for the majority of the profits generated by the record. Decent described itself as a decentralized record label, designed to offer a better deal for artists who could raise money while keeping a larger share of the profit. So how does it work exactly? Let's take a real-life example. Using Decent, the rapper Alan Kingdom allocated 50% of the revenue that will be generated by his track Coming to America in the next 3 years. That 50% was broken down to 50 editions, each worth 1% of future revenue. You could then purchase one of those editions for 0.075 Ethereum, currently about $200. In total, Alan Kingdom was able to pretty quickly raise about $10,000 in return for half of the future profits of one of his tracks for the next 3 years. From the artist's perspective, that's a very fair deal compared to what a record label would offer, although, to be fair, a typical record deal would probably provide much more than $10,000. Decent is in the intersection of two complicated subjects, the business side of the music industry and crypto. I'll do my best not to tire you with long explanations about these subjects because there are many other resources on them, and I specifically want to focus on the product side of things, so let's talk about that. Every product analysis should start with the people involved. In other words, who is this for and what's in it for them? In Decent's case, we're obviously talking about a two-sided network product that has artists on the one side and fans on the other side. The team at Decent was nice enough to lay out their value proposition right on their homepage. For artists, Decent's value proposition is pretty straightforward. 1. Raise money and retain a larger share of your profits. 2. Energize your superfans by aligning your financial interest with them. That brings us to the second side of the transaction, fans. Fans play a huge part in the story that Decent is telling. The idea is that allowing fans to invest financially in the success of the artist will transform those fans to superfans, since they'll have added incentive to go out there and promote the artist. Decent goes as far as calling them fans turned teammates and suggesting that they'll promote the artist on a level comparable with the promotion offered by a record label. Interestingly, while Decent is very clear on its value proposition to artists, they're not as clear as to what's in it for fans. They mention 3 things. 1, the opportunity for fans to manage their own label. 2, fans can discover new artists. And 3, support their favorites in a way never before possible. I'm not too sure about point number 1 and point number 2, to be honest. It's hard for me to believe many fans would want to own their own record label. That seems like a very specific desire. As for music discovery, what would make Decent more efficient in introducing new artists I might like than Spotify that has piles of data on what music I listen to every day? But I do think the third point is credible. I went to an open mic night a few years back and heard this amazing artist play, and I remember thinking, this guy's gonna be huge. A few years went by, and guess what? He did become huge. And it's not just me. Fans regularly give money to support their favorite artist on crowdfunding websites. So if fans are already willing to support artists financially for small perks, it's not unreasonable to believe that they'll do that even more when the incentive is greater, a share in the artist's future profit. To summarize this part real quick, Decent is a network of artists and fans. Artists get better terms to raise capital and an energized fan base. Fans get the satisfaction of supporting beloved artists with the nice little financial incentives that comes with it. Alright, now that we understand who the relevant users are and what does Decent offer for them, let's take a look at the product and see how it executes on its promise. Visiting Decent website, we can see that the main call to action on the website is explore artists, which makes sense. Here we can see that 3 artists already sold shares of their future revenue. Notice how the main action now is trade on OpenSea. Let me explain that real quick. The artists we just saw have already raised the funds by selling off parts of their revenue. Those parts are now owned by whoever it is that bought it. However, Decent now encourages me, a random guy on the internet, to go to OpenSea Marketplace and buy that share of revenue from the original buyer. And going to OpenSea, we can see that this is actually happening. At least some of the original buyers have already sold their ownership and transferred it to other people for a higher cost. And all that happened in just a matter of days from their original sell. Now, there is nothing inherently wrong with buying an asset and selling it for a higher price. That's a perfectly legitimate behavior. But it's something we're expecting to see from investors, not emotionally invested fans. I think this is important, so I want to emphasize this. At the early stages of a startup, especially an industry disruptive one like Decent, the founding team wants to build an MVP, get it out there as fast as possible, and see if the basic hypothesis of the product would prove to be right. From Decent's very early traction, it seems that they were definitely able to convince artists to raise funds, but I'm not sure if the funds were raised by actual fans rather than crypto investors. Remember, the distinction between fans and investors is actually important to the artist as well, since part of Decent's value proposition is an energized fan base that will help with promotion. This is where I think the Decent team needs to make a decision. Are they building a product for fans or investors? There's no right or wrong answer to this question, but it does have a lot of product implications. If Decent is building a product for fans, I'd expect it to have many of the features of a crowdfunding website like Kickstarter or Indiegogo. Looking at a typical listing on a crowdfunding website, the main experience in the page is a video by an artist explaining who they are and why they are raising funds. The video is not there by accident. It's the best media form to convey a personal message from an artist looking to connect with fans. Notice the recurring use of the word backers that reinforces the underlying experience for fans, backing their beloved artist. The goal of the fundraising is repeatedly communicated across the page, most noticeably in a highly visible progress bar. Those visual elements convey the message that the fans are not just helping the artist in general, they're helping the artist achieve a very concrete milestone. The progress to that milestone can be monitored and celebrated as a group. The perks offered for fans tend to be very personal in nature. Things like having your name in the album credit would clearly only be meaningful to a true fan. Now, to be fair, this is something that exists on Decent, but I'm just saying that to position the product for fans, this should be much more emphasized. Thanks to all these features and visual elements, the overall experience doesn't feel like a financial transaction, although this is exactly what's happening here. The overall experience feels like taking part in a group effort to help something creative and wonderful happen. Just so you know, I am aware that there are other methods to de-emphasize the financial incentive side of Decent, but like I said, I really don't want to dive into the technicalities of cryptos and NFTs. Now, I'm not sure that Decent should build these features to accommodate raising money from fans. I suspect the initial traction of Decent so far is made out of crypto investors driven primarily by their very legitimate desire to make money. Let's take a second to talk about the product implications of pivoting to investors. Well, if Decent would target investors, I'd expect it to look more like a very close competitors in the field, Royalty Exchange. Royalty Exchange enables investors to buy and sell the rights for music royalties. When we visit Royalty Exchange website, it's immediately clear that they target investors who are here to get a nice return on their investment. Looking at the random listing on the site, it's clear that it provides much more details and analytics to help investors guide their decision. You'd expect to see things like revenue broken down by different time periods, but you'd also expect to see things like social media metrics. Is this artist gaining popularity on social media? It would also make sense to offer financial products, such as indexes that bundle together multiple artists from a specific genre. Just to clarify, Decent is a very early stage company and I'm not trying to criticize the lack of features. Just to point out that Decent should make a decision as to who is it catering for and build the right feature set accordingly. Okay, I hope that demonstrates how the decision as to what features to build should be guided from the very basics of the product. Who is it for and what value is it providing? That's it for this time. If you like the video, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button to help this humble channel grow. Thank you and I'll see you next time.